I'm 37 years old now, and for the past 4 years, I've been trying to prove that a single audio recording is fake. My name is Dr. Elias Marsh. I specialize in bioacoustics, the study of sound production and reception in marine animals. I've spent 12 years analyzing whale songs, dolphin communication systems, and the clicking patterns of deep-sea predators. I know what every catalog species in the ocean sounds like. The recording I received in October 2019 matched none of them. It arrived on a standard external hard drive, unmarked except for a date written in black marker, 08/15/2019. No return address, no explanation. I plugged it into my computer and opened the single file stored on the drive. The recording was 17 minutes long, captured at 11:47 p.m. near the Mariana Trench, approximately 3,800 meters below the surface. For the first 3 minutes, I heard standard ambient ocean noise. Then, at 3:14 into the recording, I heard something else, a vocalization. Low frequency between 80 and 120 hertz, rising and falling in distinct patterns, not random acoustic variation. This had structure, rhythm, intentionality. I played it back 6 times before I accepted what I was hearing. The sound contained phonetic elements. I ran the audio through spectrographic analysis software. The frequency patterns formed shapes I recognized, formants, the acoustic resonances that characterize vowel sounds in human speech. The vocalization wasn't random. It was articulated, shaped by something that had a vocal tract structure similar enough to human anatomy that it produced recognizable phonetic features. I spent the next week analyzing every second of that recording. I filtered out background noise, isolated the vocalization, ran it through every acoustic database I had access to. Nothing matched. I sent clips to colleagues in marine mammal research. Everyone who responded said the same thing, probably a hoax, definitely not something they'd encountered in legitimate field research. I tried to trace the origin of the hard drive and searched for research expeditions operating near those coordinates in August 2019. Only one vessel had been conducting acoustic research, the Tethus, operated by the Pelagic Research Institute out of Seattle. When I called the institute, the director told me the vessel had been decommissioned in September due to equipment failure, that all data from the August expedition had been corrupted and lost. That should have been the end of it. But I kept coming back to one detail. At 14:22 in the recording, the vocalization changed. For exactly 8 seconds, the sound formed 3 distinct words in ancient Greek, classical Attic Greek, from around 400 BCE. The translation was simple: "We remember you." I'm a scientist. I don't believe in unexplained mysteries. But I listened to those 3 words in that dead language spoken by something in the deepest part of the ocean, and I understood that someone wanted me to know what was down there. I made a decision that night. I would prove the recording was fake, find the source, expose the hoax, and close this case with a definitive explanation. I was wrong about all of it. I spent 6 months trying to find records, gave me nothing. In March 2020, I received an anonymous email, "Check no AA incident database, reference number TH190904 confidential." When I had a contact search for it, she called me back from a personal phone 3 days later. She told me the reference number was classified, that someone with higher clearance had flagged her query and questioned why she was looking. I hired a private maritime investigator. 6 weeks later, he called with information that cost me $8,000. The Tethus had filed a standard voyage plan for acoustic surveys along the Mariana Trench. The last official check-in came on August 16th at 9:30 a.m. They reported normal operations, no equipment issues. On September 4th, when the vessel failed to check in, maritime authorities initiated a search. They found the Tethus adrift 200 miles from its reported position, engines cold, all systems offline. The vessel was empty. No crew, no lifeboats missing, no distress signal, no sign of struggle. 9 people had simply vanished from a ship floating in the middle of the ocean. The vessel's navigational data showed something impossible. On August 15th at 11:32 p.m., 15 minutes before my recording timestamp, the Tethus had altered course sharply, turning 87 degrees and accelerating to maximum speed. The ship traveled nearly 200 miles at full speed into a region that wasn't part of their research plan. Then, on August 16th at 1:47 p.m., all systems shut down simultaneously. When salvage crews boarded the abandoned vessel, they found the laboratory destroyed, equipment overturned, computers smashed, storage drives physically demolished. One wall had been covered in writing done with a black marker, the same word written times, follow. The vessel's acoustic monitoring equipment had been deliberately sabotaged. Someone had taken a fire axe to it, destroying any possibility of data recovery. The hard drive I'd received was the only surviving record of what the Tethus had been listening to. I returned to the audio file and filtered it differently, amplifying frequencies I'd initially dismissed as background noise. I heard more voices, multiple vocalizations, overlapping, at least 7 distinct sources. They weren't just calling, they were calling to the ship specifically, directing sounds at the recording equipment with acoustic precision. And underneath those vocalizations, I heard a rhythm, not random, not equipment interference. A deliberate pulse repeating every 4.7 seconds, growing gradually louder throughout the recording. The sound of something approaching from below, rising through 3,800 meters of water, ascending toward the surface where 9 researchers were listening. The recording ended at 12:04 a.m. on August 16th. That was exactly when the Tethus had changed course and begun its journey. They'd listened to those sounds for 17 minutes, heard those voices speaking in a dead language, felt that rhythmic pulse growing stronger. And then they'd followed. I chartered a research vessel out of Reykjavik in November 2020. The Narwhal, a 45-foot boat with the equipment I needed, and a crew small enough that I could control what information left the ship. I told them I was studying deep-sea communication systems. Nobody examined the proposal too carefully. We sailed to coordinates I'd calculated based on historical maritime disappearances. Iceland's waters descend to 4,000 meters in the tectonic rifts. The first 4 days produced nothing unusual. On the 5th day, I changed my approach. I began broadcasting audio into the water, playing back sections of the original recording, not the voices, but the ambient ocean sounds. I was announcing that I'd been in their territory before. The response came at 11:23 p.m. that night, a vocalization matching the frequency patterns from the original recording, originating from approximately 3,200 meters below us. Something down there had heard my broadcast and answered. For 3 days, I maintained contact. I would broadcast at dusk and listen for responses. They came consistently, each time from roughly the same depth, but the source location shifted closer. By November 15th, the response time had decreased from 5 minutes to less than 30 seconds. They were tracking us. I deployed deep-sea sampling nets on November 16th, reinforced netting rated for large specimen capture. I set the nets at 4,000 meters with an underwater speaker playing the ambient sound on a loop. The alert came at 4:47 a.m., less than 6 hours after deployment. Something had entered the net at 3,800 meters, weighing between 60 and 80 kilograms. We began retrieval at dawn, hauling the catch up slowly over 3 hours. The net broke the surface at 7:52 a.m. I could see something pale gray tangled in the mesh, thrashing weakly. We swung the crane over the deck and lowered the net into our temporary holding tank. We cut the mesh away, and what we'd caught sank to the bottom of the pool. She was approximately 5 feet 6 inches long. Her skin was smooth gray, darker along the back, lighter on the ventral surface. No scales, no obvious gills. Her torso was narrow, ribcage visible, suggesting physiology adapted for pressure and streamlined movement. Her arms were longer than human proportions, with webbing between elongated fingers. 4 digits plus an opposable thumb, capable of sophisticated manipulation. Her face made my first mate step back from the tank, almost human. The bone structure followed human patterns, defined cheekbones, forehead with human curvature, a jaw suggesting similar dietary needs. Her nose was flatter, nostril slits that could close. Her mouth was wider, extending further back, but the lips were distinct, mobile, capable of complex vocalization. Her eyes were completely black, no visible iris, no white sclera, just reflecting black surfaces that tracked our movements with unmistakable intelligence. She was bleeding. The net had cut into her shoulder and left side. I moved slowly toward the tank and knelt at the edge, opening my hands to show I wasn't carrying anything. She watched without responding. Then she opened her mouth and spoke in my exact voice, using words I'd said less than a minute before. None of it prepared me. I spent the first hour treating her injuries while trying to establish whether she understood English or was only mimicking. She didn't fight during treatment. She watched us work, her body tense but cooperative, as if she'd calculated that allowing treatment was better than resisting. The needle going through her skin must have hurt, but she made no sound beyond slight finger contractions. I said sorry 17 times while suturing 4 lacerations. Once we returned her to the tank, she sank to the bottom and stayed there for 2 hours. When she finally surfaced at 12:47 p.m., she looked directly at me and spoke again, this time using my captain's voice from our earlier conversation. What do we do with her? The question wasn't mimicry. It was directed at me, deliberate, asking me to explain our intentions. She'd listened to our entire conversation and understood enough to identify the central question. She was demonstrating comprehension. I approached the tank and pointed to myself. "Elias," she repeated it in my voice. I pointed to her and raised my eyebrows in question. She looked at my hand, then at my face. Then she lifted one hand from the water and placed it against the side of the tank. The gesture was unmistakable. She wanted me to make contact through the barrier. I placed my palm against the tank wall where her hand rested. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then something changed. It wasn't telepathy as fiction describes it. What I experienced was memory, but memory that wasn't mine. Images appeared in my mind, dark water, pressure, moving through depth with perfect ease. Rock formations, valleys in the ocean floor, spaces between tectonic plates where heat vented into cold water. I saw others of her kind moving through those spaces, their bodies adapted perfectly for that environment. This was her language, not through sound, though they were capable of it, through shared experience, transmitted through touch, allowing thoughts and memories to flow directly between minds. She pulled her hand away, and the connection broke. The memories weren't mine, but they felt real. My hands were shaking. I'd just touched something that could put thoughts directly into my head. She lifted her hand again, pointing at herself. She opened her mouth and made a sound from her own language, a vocalization that lasted 3 seconds, rising and falling through frequencies that made the water vibrate visibly. She was telling me her name. I couldn't reproduce that sound with human vocal anatomy. She touched the tank wall again, waited. I placed my hand against hers, and the connection reopened. This time she showed me a moment from her childhood, learning to produce that vocalization correctly. She was showing me what the name meant, why my attempt had been inadequate. I played the section of my recording containing the ancient Greek words. She listened, then placed her hand on the tank. Through the connection, she showed me the answer. The words hadn't been Greek when her people first learned them. They'd been human words, spoken by humans who'd encountered her people thousands of years ago in the Aegean Sea. Her ancestors had learned them, preserved them through generations, used them to communicate with the few humans who came to the deep places with respect. "We remember you" wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Her people remembered humans from before, remembered when contact had been possible, when the two species had coexisted. They remembered us, even though we'd forgotten them, turned them into myths. I asked her through the connection why they'd called the Tethus. She showed me. The ship's hydrophones had been broadcasting into territory her people used for raising young. The ship hadn't listened to their warnings, had continued pushing deeper into sacred spaces. Her people had called to the ship, tried to warn it. The ship had followed the warnings instead. The crew had come to the source, descended into deep water, and disappeared into spaces humans couldn't survive. I pulled my hand back. The communication had exhausted both of us. My head hurt. My hands were still shaking. Everything I'd learned had only generated more questions. She began teaching me systematically the next morning. I would place my hand on the tank wall, she would join the connection, and she would show me pieces of her people's history. Hours of explanation compressed into minutes of direct experience. What she showed me over the next 4 days rewrote everything I thought I understood about human evolution. Her people weren't a separate evolutionary branch. They were human, genetically, physiologically, historically human. The differences were adaptive, environmental responses accumulated over hundreds of generations. She showed me the divergence point. The split happened approximately 12,000 years ago, during the Younger Dryas period, when Earth's climate underwent catastrophic shifts. Sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted. Coastal populations faced a choice: retreat inland or adapt to the changing waterline. Most human groups moved to higher ground. But some communities, particularly along what's now the Mediterranean coast, made a different decision. They'd lived for generations in close relationship with the ocean. When the sea level rose, when their territories flooded, they didn't abandon the ocean. They followed it down. The process took 12,000 years of incremental adaptation, each generation spending more time in water, developing better diving reflexes, selecting for traits that improved underwater performance, longer breath-holding capacity, more flexible rib cages, slightly webbed hands and feet, better low-light vision. Over hundreds of generations, those advantages accumulated. By 8,000 years ago, the deep water population had adapted enough that interbreeding with surface humans became rare. By 5,000 years ago, they were functionally separate species, though genetic compatibility remained. She showed me their early history when contact with surface humans was still common. Trade relationships, sometimes conflict, occasionally interbreeding. The Greek sailors who described sirens and mermaids were reporting actual encounters, though they interpreted what they saw through their own understanding, turning people into monsters. The separation accelerated as human technology improved. Boats became larger, fishing more intensive, humans ventured into deeper waters. Her people retreated, established territories in the deep ocean where humans rarely traveled. The last regular contact ended around 2,000 years ago, but they'd maintained their knowledge of humanity through oral tradition, through memory sharing, through careful observation of ships and divers. They remembered that they'd once been one people, that the split had been environmental necessity. They remembered the languages humans had spoken, the cultures they'd shared. I asked her why they'd maintained that knowledge. She showed me gatherings of her people, discussions about humanity, debates about whether contact should be attempted. Some argued for revealing themselves, establishing communication, creating peaceful coexistence. Others insisted humans had become too dangerous. That contact would only lead to exploitation or extinction. The debates had gone on for centuries without resolution. Until recently, when human technology began reaching depths her people had considered safe. Deep-sea mining operations, submarine surveillance, research vessels dropping hydrophones into breeding grounds. The human world was expanding into the last refugees her people had. That's why she'd allowed herself to be caught. She showed me the deliberation, elder members deciding someone needed to attempt communication, to determine whether modern humans were capable of recognizing her people as something other than resources or threats. She'd volunteered because she was young enough to be expendable if it failed. The net I'd deployed hadn't been lucky. She'd entered it deliberately, waited in the mesh for 6 hours, enduring hooks and pressure changes, because she'd decided this was the best opportunity to contact a human who might listen. She'd gambled that a scientist studying acoustic patterns would be more receptive than military or commercial ventures. She showed me her fear during that gamble. Ascending through 3,800 meters trapped in the net, not knowing if I would kill her or keep her forever, or turn her over to authorities who would treat her as a specimen. But her people were running out of options, and doing nothing meant waiting for humans to destroy them through ignorance. I pulled back from the connection, overwhelmed. 4 days of memory sharing had given me more information than decades of research could have provided. But it had also given me a responsibility I wasn't prepared for. She showed me deep-sea mining operations in her final memory, machines descending to 5,000 meters, churning through the ocean floor. The noise disrupted communication between communities. The sediment destroyed feeding grounds. The equipment severed migration routes. The operations were expanding into regions her people had used as safe harbors for thousands of years. She showed me her people's attempts to drive the machines away, sabotaging equipment, creating acoustic interference, physically disabling mining apparatus. Companies had interpreted these as equipment malfunctions, acceptable losses. They'd simply sent more machines. Her people were losing ground in months, not years. Mining operations were scheduled to expand into their primary breeding grounds within 6 months. If that happened, if machines disrupted the conditions necessary for their eggs to develop, an entire generation would be lost. She showed me the ultimatum her people had debated. If humans wouldn't listen, they would defend their territories with lethal force, not individual divers. The industrial operations themselves. They would sink vessels, kill crews, make operations so dangerous that companies would abandon the depths entirely. It would be war, and her people would probably lose. But they'd decided fighting was better than waiting passively for extinction. Unless I could deliver their message, unless I could make humans understand what existed in the deep ocean, make them recognize that the territories being mined had inhabitants, that economic value was being weighed against survival of an entire intelligent species. She withdrew from the connection. I stood at the tank, understanding finally why she'd volunteered for this. She was here to give humanity one last chance to make a different choice. And she'd chosen me because I was someone who might actually listen. I released her back to the ocean on November 22, 2020. I promised her I would deliver the message, that I would try to prevent what was coming. She touched my hand one final time before we lowered her into the water, and she showed me gratitude mixed with doubt. She didn't believe I could stop it. Neither did I. That was 4 years ago. I tried official channels and was silenced. I tried warning the corporations and was threatened with legal action. The mining operations expanded on schedule, and 3 months ago the first deep-sea mining platform suffered a catastrophic failure that killed 17 people. The official investigation blamed equipment malfunction. I know better. The war has started. And I'm releasing this now because silence hasn't worked, because more people are going to die, and because she trusted me with the truth. Her people aren't monsters. They're not myths. They're human beings defending their homes from invaders who don't even realize they're invading. The drilling continues in 3 weeks. I don't know what happens next. But I know that we were given a choice, and we're choosing conflict. We're choosing convenience over respect. And when the casualties mount, when ships start disappearing and crews start dying, we'll call them monsters for defending what's theirs. I'm 37 years old. I caught something impossible 4 years ago. She told me the truth about who they are, where they came from, and what we're forcing them to do. This is that truth. I don't expect it to change anything. But at least now, when it happens, Nobody can say they didn't know. I didn't understand the full mechanism of what she'd called the song until our 5th day together. She'd avoided showing me that particular memory, and I realized later it was because she needed to trust that I wouldn't react with fear. On November 21st, she finally offered to demonstrate it directly. I placed my hand on the tank wall. The connection opened, but this time she didn't flood my mind with images. Instead, she began to hum. Not vocally, not through sound I could hear with my ears. The vibration came through the connection itself, resonating directly in my consciousness. The sensation was overwhelming, every nerve in my body oriented toward that vibration, toward her. My legs moved without conscious decision, carrying me closer to the tank. My hand pressed harder against the plastic barrier. I wanted to get closer, needed to get closer, couldn't imagine anything more important than eliminating the distance between us. The rational part of my mind screamed warnings, but that voice was distant, irrelevant compared to the overwhelming pull. She stopped. The compulsion released me like a physical force letting go. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. My captain caught my arm. I was breathing hard, sweating despite the cold ocean air. The entire episode had lasted maybe 15 seconds, but I'd been prepared to climb into that tank, to drown myself trying to reach her. Through the connection, she showed me the mechanism. Her people's communication operated on frequencies that human brains still recognized, even after 12,000 years of separation. The neural pathways were vestigial in modern humans, suppressed by other cognitive developments, but they remained functional. When her people produced those specific frequency patterns, human nervous systems interpreted them as irresistible imperative, bypassing conscious thought. It wasn't magic, it was acoustic neurology, sound waves triggering ancient response patterns that predated language. Her people had refined it over thousands of generations, learned to modulate the frequencies for specific effects: attraction, repulsion, confusion, paralysis. She showed me how they used it, primarily for defense, creating zones around their territories that humans experienced as unreasonable dread, sometimes for communication when they encountered surface humans who needed to be guided away from dangerous areas. The tragedies happened when humans misunderstood. A fisherman going overboard in a storm, her people using the call to guide him toward shallow water. But the call triggered the approach response, and the fisherman swam toward the source instead of toward shore. He drowned trying to reach the rescuers because his brain interpreted their help as an invitation to follow them into depths he couldn't survive. She showed me the Tethus crew's final hours. The ship's hydrophones had picked up the warning calls, frequencies meant to indicate territorial boundaries. But the crew didn't have context to understand. They'd recorded the sounds, analyzed them, became fascinated by the patterns. The longer they listened through the hydrophones, the more their nervous systems synchronized with the frequencies. By the time the Tethus changed course, the crew was already compromised. The call had been broadcasting into their minds for hours, building compulsion gradually. When her people realized what was happening, they'd tried to stop, tried to reverse the effect, but 9 humans were already committed, already following. The crew had followed the call down into the water, not in diving equipment, not with any preparation. They'd simply gone over the side in the middle of the night. Her people had tried to save them, had brought them to air pockets in underwater caves, tried to teach them to hold breath. 6 had drowned in the first hour, 3 had survived almost 2 days before their bodies gave out. I asked her through the next connection whether her people could stop using it, whether they could defend their territories without that weapon. She showed me the reality. Without the acoustic defense, they had no way to create boundaries that humans would respect. The song was their only effective tool for maintaining the spaces they needed to survive. On November 22nd, our 6th day together, she showed me where the bodies were kept. The connection opened, and I saw caves at depths where sunlight had never penetrated. The water pressure at those depths would crush human bodies instantly. but her people lived there comfortably. She showed me cave systems that extended for miles, marked over thousands of years through acoustic mapping. In certain chambers, the deepest and coldest, her people maintained memorial sites, bodies preserved by pressure, cold, and darkness, arranged carefully in alcoves carved into rock. Not just human bodies, I saw the remains of her own people, individuals who'd died from injury or age. Mixed among them were humans, dozens of them, spanning centuries based on varying states of preservation. She showed me the most recent additions. The Tethus crew, 9 bodies arranged side by side in a chamber designated specifically for them. They looked almost peaceful, suspended in cold water, features preserved by pressure and lack of scavengers. Their eyes were closed. Someone had done that deliberately. I asked through the connection why her people kept them, why they didn't return the bodies to the surface. She showed me the complications. Bringing bodies up from those depths required controlled decompression, time and resources her people couldn't spare, and more critically, returning bodies raised questions. Each body was evidence of contact, proof that something intelligent existed in the deep ocean. Her people had made calculations about risk. Every body returned to the surface was potential discovery, potential reason for humans to investigate deeper. So they'd made the choice to keep the dead, to honor them in ways that aligned with their own cultural practices. She showed me older bodies in different chambers, a sailor from what looked like the 18th century, a woman in diving equipment from the 1960s, a child, maybe 10 years old, dressed in simple cloth. That one hurt to see. She conveyed the emotional weight her people carried. Every body in those caves represented a failure from their perspective, a human they'd been unable to save. They mourned the humans the same way they mourned their own dead, treating the remains with identical reverence. I pulled back from the connection and asked, "How many are there?" She showed me a count through scale. Dozens in the past century, hundreds over the past 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 total across all the millennia since separation. Not genocide, not systematic killing, but steady accumulation of deaths resulting from contact between species that no longer understood each other. Some had been accidents, divers experiencing equipment failure, her people unable to save them, sailors going overboard in storms, submarines experiencing catastrophic failure. Some had been territorial defense, humans with harpoons or explosives killed in the resulting confrontations, military submarines penetrating breeding grounds deliberately targeted when warnings were ignored, and some had been darker. She showed me those memories with obvious reluctance. Individuals among her people who'd killed humans out of anger, revenge, or cruelty. Her people weren't uniformly peaceful. Those bodies were kept separately, in different caves, marked as something shameful. My captain asked what I'd learned. I told her about the memorial caves, about the Tethus crew arranged carefully, thousands of meters below the surface. She asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do we tell the families? I didn't have an answer. Telling meant revealing the species, exposing them to human investigation. Not telling meant families would remain officially missing with no explanation beyond lost at sea. I made the decision that I've regretted almost every day since. I chose to keep the secret. I told myself I was protecting an intelligent species from extinction. But the truth is, I was afraid of what would happen if I told, afraid of the military response, afraid of becoming responsible for the destruction that would follow. On our final morning together, she showed me what her people had sent her to communicate. Everything before had been context. This was the message itself. The connection opened with unusual intensity. This was structured communication, something her people had composed deliberately, designed specifically for human understanding. I felt multiple voices in the transmission, elders and leaders who'd contributed to crafting what I was about to receive. The message began with a map, not visual but acoustic, showing me the ocean through echolocation patterns. I perceived the major trench systems, deep water territories her people had claimed for thousands of years. The Mariana Trench, the Puerto Rico Trench, the Peru-Chile Trench, dozens of others. Then she overlaid human activity, shipping lanes crossing above their territories, fishing operations depleting prey species, military exercises with sonar powerful enough to damage hearing, to kill, and most critically, expanding zones of deep-sea mining operations descending to depths humans had historically left untouched. The mining was concentrated where rare earth minerals accumulated. Those same areas were the primary breeding grounds her people used, the specific pressure and temperature conditions necessary for their eggs to develop. The mining operations were scheduled to expand into every major breeding ground within 18 months. She showed me what would happen if mining continued. The noise alone would drive her people away from spawning sites. The sediment plumes would contaminate water, making it toxic for developing eggs. The physical disruption would destroy formations her people had used for generations. The timeline was critical. Her people's reproductive cycle was slower than humans, more vulnerable to disruption. Losing even one generation of successful breeding could begin a population decline they wouldn't recover from. Her people had tried to stop the mining without revealing themselves. She showed me sabotage operations, coordinated efforts to disable equipment. Some mining companies had withdrawn, others had simply invested in better equipment, more robust systems. The message shifted to show me the decision her people had made. They would give humanity one final warning. If humans acknowledged that communication and withdrew from critical breeding grounds, her people would retreat to deeper territories and attempt coexistence. But if the warning was ignored, if mining operations continued after humanity had been directly informed that doing so meant threatening an intelligent species with extinction, her people would interpret that as declaration of war. They would stop limiting themselves to equipment sabotage. They would target the human operators, the crews, the support infrastructure. She showed me what that would look like. Mining platforms experiencing catastrophic failures that killed entire crews. Support vessels disappearing with all hands. The operations would become graveyards, not because her people wanted to kill, but because they'd been given no other option. The message included specific timelines. Mining operations were scheduled to begin in the primary Mariana Trench breeding ground on March 15th, 6 months away. If mining continued past April 1st, her people would implement lethal defense protocols on April 2nd. That gave me 4 months to deliver the message, to convince authorities that intelligent beings existed in the deep ocean, to persuade mining corporations to abandon operations worth billions of dollars. The message ended with a question directed at me. Would I deliver the warning, or would I join the long history of humans who'd been shown the truth and chosen silence? I told her I would try. She touched the tank wall one final time. The connection opened briefly. She showed me doubt, not about my sincerity, but about human capacity to change course. She didn't believe humanity would choose to protect an unknown species over economic advantage. I released her that afternoon. She slid into the North Atlantic without hesitation, surfaced once, looked back at me, and descended. I watched her form fade into blue darkness. Then I went below deck and began writing the report I would send to every authority I could identify. I returned to San Diego on December 3, 2020, with video footage, audio recordings, and a story nobody would believe without evidence. I submitted my report to the Scripps Institution, where I'd been employed for 8 years. My department head called me into his office on December 10th. "Elias, this isn't publishable," he said. He hadn't opened the video files, hadn't reviewed anything beyond the summary. "You're describing cryptozoology, not marine biology." He suggested I take a leave of absence. That isolation during the expedition might have affected my judgment. The conversation ended with an ultimatum: retract the report or face disciplinary review. I contacted maritime authorities next. I sent detailed documentation to NOAA, the International Seabed Authority, environmental protection divisions of 6 governments. Most didn't respond. The ones who did sent form letters thanking me for my concern. One official from the ISA called me. His name was Dr. Raymond Chen, a marine ecologist who'd actually watched parts of my video footage. "Dr. Marsh, I'm going to be direct," he said. "Even if everything in your report is authentic, publishing this would be catastrophic for deep-sea conservation efforts. The mining corporations would use your report to discredit all conservation arguments. They'd characterize the entire environmental movement as willing to fabricate evidence." I tried the mining corporations directly. 2 ignored the communication entirely. The third sent a legal letter threatening to sue me for defamation. A private investigator showed up at my apartment on January 8, 2021. He told me very clearly that if I continued interfering with their operations, they would pursue legal action that would bankrupt me and destroy my career. By March, I realized I'd failed. The warning wasn't being delivered. Mining operations were proceeding on schedule. The only remaining possibility was going public, releasing evidence directly to media. I was ready to publish on March 28th. The day before, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a black pearl identical to the one she'd given me, and a single photograph. The photograph showed a mining platform in the Mariana Trench, taken from underwater. Surrounding it were shapes, dozens of them, gray forms circling the structure. There was no note, but the message was clear. Her people were in position, watching, ready to act if the deadline passed without change. I made a decision that I've questioned every day since. I didn't publish the evidence. I destroyed the most compelling footage, the close-up video of her face, the clearest documentation of her speaking. I told myself I was protecting her people, but the truth is, I was afraid of the legal consequences, the professional destruction, the responsibility. On April 1st, the mining operation continued on schedule. On April 23rd, a mining platform in the Mariana Trench experienced catastrophic system failures. When the support vessel reached it 3 days later, they found it abandoned. The crew of 12 had vanished. No lifeboats were missing. No distress signals had been sent. Her people had kept their promise. And I'd failed to prevent it because I'd chosen my own safety over delivering the message. I'm 37 years old. I've been keeping this secret for 4 years, and in that time, 37 more people have disappeared from deep-sea mining operations in the Pacific. The pattern is consistent. Platforms experience sudden system failures. Crews vanish without distress signals. Equipment shows evidence of sabotage. The conflict I failed to prevent is escalating gradually. Not fast enough that anyone recognizes it as conflict, but steady enough that deep-sea mining has become the most dangerous industrial occupation in the world. I'm releasing this account now because 3 months ago, a mining corporation announced plans to expand operations into what my research indicates is the primary breeding ground in the Atlantic, the Puerto Rico Trench. The expansion is scheduled to begin in 8 weeks. Based on the pattern I've observed, her people will respond with escalated force. The Pacific conflict has been contained to individual platforms. If her people defend the Atlantic territories with the same determination, we're looking at multiple platform failures, possibly simultaneous attacks, potentially hundreds of casualties. At that scale, the pattern will become impossible to ignore. When that happens, when humanity realizes something intelligent is attacking our operations, the response won't be diplomatic, it will be military. We'll hunt her people systematically, treat them as enemies rather than as intelligent beings defending their territories. The war will escalate beyond anything either species wants. I can't stop that sequence anymore. But I can ensure that when the pattern becomes undeniable, there's a record explaining what actually happened. This account won't stop the war, but it might help someone understand that the war didn't start with her people attacking us. It started with us pushing into territories we were warned away from. I've spent 4 years trying to convince myself that silence was the ethical choice, but 37 people are dead because I didn't find a way to make humanity listen. 37 families don't know their relatives are preserved in memorial caves at depths we can't reach. The filmmaker who contacted me last month is scheduled to begin her expedition in 6 weeks. She's targeting the Puerto Rico Trench specifically, the same area where mining expansion is planned. I tried to warn her. She dismissed it the same way everyone dismissed me 4 years ago. So I'm publishing this account with the video evidence I've kept, accepting that this revelation will probably accelerate the conflict rather than resolve it. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is continued silence while casualties mount, while her people are forced into increasingly violent defense, while humanity stumbles toward war without understanding what we're fighting. To the mining corporations, you've been warned. The disappearances aren't equipment failures, they're responses to territorial invasion. Withdraw from the primary breeding sites, and the attacks will stop. To the families who've lost people, your relatives are dead because corporations pushed into territories they were warned away from. Your relatives' bodies are being kept in memorial caves, preserved and mourned by the beings who killed them, defending what little space they have left. To her, I failed. I tried to deliver your message, but I didn't find a way to make them listen. I'm releasing this evidence knowing it might make things worse for your people, but silence wasn't working. To everyone else, this document proves that intelligent aquatic beings exist in the deep ocean, that they're defending territories we're mining, and that we're approaching catastrophic conflict. You can dismiss this as fiction. But in 8 weeks, when the Puerto Rico Trench mining expansion begins, when platforms start experiencing the same pattern of failures, remember that you were warned. The deep ocean isn't empty. It isn't ours just because we've developed technology to reach it. The beings who've lived there for 12,000 years are running out of space. They've been trying to warn us for decades. We've interpreted their warnings as mysteries, as legends. Now they're defending themselves with lethal force, and we're calling it equipment failure. But the pattern is there for anyone willing to see it. Stop mining the breeding grounds. Establish protected zones. Demonstrate that humanity is capable of recognizing another intelligent species' right to exist, or continue expansion, continue ignoring the warnings, and accept that what comes next is the war we chose by refusing to listen. I should have made this choice 4 years ago. I can't change that failure, but I can ensure that when the war becomes undeniable, nobody can say they didn't know why it started. The deep ocean remembers us. They remember when we were one people, when contact was possible. They remember us even though we forgot them. Now we're going to remember them too, the hard way.